How long after a puppet notices its strings does it dream of the day that it cuts free from them? As it's only natural for us to desire control over our lives. Because even if you're a king, if it only comes in name alone, do your actions really matter? Well, this question of personal freedom and wanting to assert your dominance over your life is what drove the 43rd President of the United States to break free from his shackles and attempt to tear down the organization which propped him up. This, of course, being the story of the cloned, callous, control-conquering Commander-in-Chief, George Sears, also known as Solidus Snake. George Sears, or Solidus Snake, is the former president of the United States and perfect genetic clone of the world's greatest soldier, Big Boss, who played a role as the major antagonistic force throughout the story of Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty, though his actions have gone on to impact the whole series. Though, to say that he played his role would be an understatement, as Solidus was covertly manipulated from behind the scenes by the exact entity that he seeks to destroy, his puppet masters, or the secret organization known as the Patriots. Though, before we can get too deep into that, let's first understand the meaning behind his name and design. Now, the names Solidus Snake and George Sears are names that carry with them a handful of meaning which holds a significance that relates back to his character. So let's first start by discussing his codename and the one I'll be referring to him most by, that being Solidus Snake. Starting first with the beginning, Solidus, as not only does it hold a historical context which ties back to Latin, being a gold coin that was paid to Roman soldiers for their service, and became a word so associated with soldiers that it became the actual origin for the word soldier itself, which of course is an element of his name that ties directly back to Solidus's role throughout most of his life, with him even being a perfect genetic clone of the greatest soldier in the world, Big Boss. As well, Solidus can be used in a chemistry sense, as a solidus is a line used in a pressure and temperature diagram which signifies the point when a solid or a liquid changes state. Now, this of course ties Solidus back to his twin brothers, and of course the whole Les Enfants Terribles program, as well working with the fact that he had been manipulating both solid and liquid at different points in the series. As well, Kojima later stated that his choice for picking Solidus as the name came from the fact that it was not a state of matter, but a boundary between them, which may act as an example of why Solidus is neither a true villain like Liquid or a true hero like Solid. As well, he mentioned that Gas Snake was once considered as an option, but Gas Snake, like Gas Human, wasn't a very handsome name, or very appealing at all. Though, speaking of the snake portion of Solidus's name, much like the other snakes in the series, it comes from the Kurt Russell character of Snake Plissken, with Metal Gear Solid 2 even wearing this reference on its sleeve, with the undercover alias for Solid Snake being Iroquois Plissken. Though with Solidus, there's a bit of a twist on it. As with the other snakes, they tend to model themselves after the Escape from New York's version of the character. And with the end of Metal Gear Solid 2, you might believe Solidus would be the same, but his personality has actually been confirmed to be based on the more anti-authoritarian mindset and desire for a better future of humanity that Plisken's character has in Escape from LA. Though Solidus has many more connections to revolutionists than Snake Plissken, and we can find two examples of this in his Patriots given name of George Sears. Now, his first name, George, derives from the first president of the United States, George Washington, whom would have become a figure in Solidus's life that he would idolize, as he is a man who stood up against an oppressive government force and in such carved his name into history. Which is why Solidus likely took it as both a great honor and horrible disgrace when he was selected as the 43rd president of the United States, though we'll get more into that later into the video. Though his last name, Sears, is also taken from another iconic figure of American history. This, of course, being Isaac Sears, one of the founding members and leader of the anti-British political organization known as the Sons of Liberty, which is a group created to oppose the taxation put into place by the British government and would fight off new legislation that would oppose the 13 colonies' own personal freedom, with one of the famous examples being the Stamp Act. Isaac Sears also took on the nickname of King Sears during his time and would eventually end up leading the New York version of the Boston Tea Party in 1773. And Solidus reflects Isaac Sears in many ways, from him having the codename of King, being what Ocelot addresses him as
King, Fat Man is dead.
It doesn't matter.
to him organizing a group of rebels in a similar fashion to the Sons of Liberty in the form of the Dead Cell unit, as well with him being named George Sears. It is a double reference to him rebelling against the current acting government force which impedes the personal freedoms of the world, known as the Patriots, with him even having a final battle against them on Capitol Hill in New York City specifically, though the only reason that he was allowed to get as far as he did was because the Patriots had propped him up since birth, as Solidus was the secret third survivor of the Les Enfants Terribles program, being the only perfect genetic clone of his father, Big Boss. And in being a clone of Big Boss meant that he suffered from the same defects which plagued all the other clones, though seemingly due to the purity involved in his cloning, his seemed to worsen over time compared to his brothers, with the failsafe put into place by the Patriots, such as hyper-accelerated aging, affecting him at seemingly twice the rate of the other two clones. This allowed Solidus to take on the visual appearance of a man in his late 20s during just his teenage years. As well, due to the nature of a clone, Solidus was sterile and unable to pass on his genes in any way, making him essentially just a tool for the government, and it was during his teenage years that he would be deployed to Liberia in order to help maintain some form of order during their years of civil unrest. Though, as the political climate grew more and more violent, Solidus eventually found himself a player in the Liberian Civil War. And during this time of war, seeing all these men and women die for the sake of a country they believed in, this likely caused Solidus to become a bit more introspective, and in the chaos, it created a perfect smokescreen to allow him to test his theories on the purpose of his own existence, as he would forcibly adopt a young boy after killing his parents and raise him to be a fighter within his own personal military group called the Army of the Devil, specifically placed in his unit of child soldiers known as the Small Boy Unit. This young man would be named Jack and would undergo a series of specialized training sessions alongside his standard Small Boy Unit conditioning of American movies and gunpowder in their food, with Jack being regularly taken aside and injected with powerful stimuli and forced to observe footage of horrific violence and war. Solidus even choosing to slit the throat of a POW right in front of Jack to show Jack how easy it was to take a life. Along with this, Solidus would work to instill values over the importance of bladed weapons in warfare over guns, as they were a more honest and intimate weapon on the battlefield and an indicator of a soldier's true worth. And now, with this training complete, Jack had fully corrupted into a stone-cold killer by age 6, and it was throughout the next 4 years that he would earn the rank of captain. As well, he would earn himself a series of nicknames for his actions, with the most famous of them being Jack the Ripper. And according to the Metal Gear Solid 2 comic, Solidus would even make it a point to have Jack kill POWs on his birthday. Specifically on his 10th, he had set up 10 separate prisoners and told Jack to decapitate each of them. Killing them was his birthday candles. Though soon enough, the Patriots would call for Solidus to return to the US, and during the late 90s, he would begin a new type of training for his next big role. This of course being the 43rd President of the United States, as Solidus would be elected in around the early 2000s and had a campaign built for him which contained a strong stance against eugenics, as well as a big push for the United States missile defense system. As well, during his time as president, Solidus saw to the creation of the Dead Cell unit, likely a in-universe response to the September 11th attacks, though those hadn't happened during the time of Metal Gear Solid 2's writing, so it was never directly addressed. But Dead Cell is a Navy counter-terrorist unit which was based on the real-life Red Cell, with Dead Cell's own history even reflecting that of Red Cell's, as both units saw both their founding members jailed. In the case of Dead Cell, this was Colonel Jackson, while in the real-life Red Cell, this was Dick Marcinko. Though the difference between the two organizations is that Colonel Jackson would end up dying, which led to great instability inside of Dead Cell. As well, an interesting coincidence is that Metal Gear Solid 2 would end up predicting the reformation of Red Cell as a unit, as they would be reformed following 9/11 to try to prevent a terror attack of that nature from ever happening again. This, of course, is clearly an unintentional element of the story, as Metal Gear Solid 2 was written before 9/11 had occurred, and it had to be changed drastically due to the attacks, though I felt this coincidence was too interesting not to mention. As well, during his presidency, Solidus would push for the development of a national missile defense system, even though it violated the current anti-ballistic missile treaty, as he hoped to negotiate the revisions of the ABM treaty during START 3. an arms control treaty which would lower the stockpile of active nuclear arms in both the US and Russia. As well, much like how he pushed for the National Missile Defense System, Solidus would also work to see that his secret black budget project would be finished. This of course being the nuclear-capable Metal Gear Rex. And with his presidency coming to its end, he hoped that he could use his current position to strike back against the Patriots, who had turned him and the country he grew to love into their puppets. So during the Start 3 negotiations in 2005, Solidus ordered his associate, Revolver Ocelot, to convince Liquid Snake along with the rest of Foxhound to initiate the raid on Shadow Moses' military base, with the hopes that Ocelot would be able to claim Rex's launch data as well as the data on the experimental warhead which Rex had been loaded with. Ocelot would then carefully extract the data from Metal Gear Rex and return to Solidus, who rewarded him by paying for arm surgery for his new missing arm. And following the events of Shadow Moses, both the existence of Metal Gear and the Genome Soldier project became public knowledge. Thus, fearing for his life, Solidus would go into hiding, as the Patriots have forcibly removed his power from him, taking him out of office and saying that he had resigned behind closed doors. Though while in hiding, he began to formulate a plan to strike back at them. Solidus would reconnect with the counter-terrorist unit that he had created, that being Dead Cell, along with his most trusted companion, Revolver Ocelot, who would go on to introduce him to a Russian private military company leader, Sergei Galukovich, that would go on to offer Solidus his entire private military. Solidus would then call this collection of people the Sons of Liberty, based clearly on the origins of his name. And of course, with this new organization also came a flag to represent them. This flag itself is flush with a lot of historical influences, just like Solidus's character. Firstly, the 13 red and white stripes symbolize the original 13 colonies, which the original Sons of Liberty fought to protect. As well, the snake on the flag is a rattlesnake that not only symbolized Solidus, but was also a clear reference to the Godsden flag, or the Don't Tread on Me flag, with the rattlesnake meant to represent or symbolize the American people. And with this mixture of symbols, Solidus was clearly trying to get across that his organization was a just rebellion, one that mirrored the same type that won this country its freedom all those years back. And with everything in place, he began his coup, as on April 29th of 2009, Solidus Snake, under the pseudonym of Solid Snake and armed with a cutting-edge exoskeleton cyborg suit, would raid the offshore water cleanup facility of the Big Shell during one of his presidential successors, James Johnson's, visits. Now, this is the point where I think we should talk more about Solidus's design, as we get to see a lot of his clear inspirations, with one of the most obvious being his father, Big Boss, which is a fact that he takes great pride in. He would even have this connection reinforced during the events of Metal Gear Solid 2 when he would lose one of his eyes following the Harrier fight, resulting in Solidus choosing to wear an eye patch, though his lost eye ends up being the opposite one to his father. As well, a cool detail about him that you might not know, during this scene,
stop impersonating him!
The person Snake is telling Solidus to stop impersonating is Big Boss. As well, another really cool detail about Solidus's in-game design is that due to him being a clone just like Solid and Liquid, when creating his in-game model, Solidus is actually the same face model as Solid with some age textures applied to it. As well, one aspect of Solidus's character that was lost in translation is how him and Solid have the exact same voice actor, which not only explains how he is able to steal Solid's identity, but also was supposed to play into the miscommunication and confusion on the Big Shell for both Raiden and the player. As well, the performance of Akio Otsuka was much different than the late great John Saigon's, with Otsuka's Solidus being a much calmer and more egotistical villain.
Stop this infighting! I took you both in when no one else would. You think any government would have you as irregulars in this political climate?
いいか、仲間割れはよせ。行く当てのないお前たちを拾ってやったんだ。お前たちがよそで非合法活動できる時勢ではない。
They got my eye!
目をやられた。
Which makes sense, as according to the script of Metal Gear Solid 2, founded on the documentary disc, the way Solidus' character is read for in English isn't really the direct intention. But I do find both performances to be very enjoyable nonetheless. Though back to his visual design, Solidus's battlesuit went through quite a few revisions itself during the developmental phase of Metal Gear Solid 2, with some versions of it being really reserved, while others matched up more with popular depictions of the Japanese god of storms, Fujin, with the snake-armed tentacles even resting across his shoulders like the deity's bag of wind. And this actually kinda works for Solidus and gives him a very commanding profile, and plays with his son's codename of Raiden, which is a translation of Raijin, the god of thunder and counterpart to Fujin. Speaking of Solidus's snake arms though, his suit does come equipped with two powerful tentacles which are capable of grappling, which allows Solidus to swing around or grab others. They can also fire out a series of stored missiles, which Solidus can aim better by underarm gripping his tentacles. As well, the snake arms seem to be controlled via thought, likely linked to some nanomachines within Solidus's body that allow him to move them like any other appendage. Though the tips can also release a electromagnetic wave that allows him to scan the contents of a body for any foreign substance like nanomachines. Though, if they become too encumbersome, Solidus can just eject the tentacles from his power suit to increase his overall speed, which, thanks along to the accelerators built into the suit, allows Solidus to reach superhuman levels of speed and strength, easily outrunning machine gun fire and even being able to leap great distances. The suit itself is also rather bullet resistant, with Solidus blocking rifle fire by himself. As well, the suit has a specialized thruster which leaves a flame trail behind him, which was an aspect of his design that was originally supposed to be shown off during his debut cutscene with him using the accelerators to burn off his massive coat, but it kinda got mixed up with the explosives of the C4 behind him, so that idea wasn't really delivered on until his boss fight. Solidus also carries with him a P90 personal defense weapon, which is a fully ambidextrous submachine gun-like weapon that is favored by nations across the world, but is most famously used as the weapon of choice for the Secret Service of the United States, which may be in fact where Solidus gained his familiarity with the weapon, even being able to one-hand and twirl it like a revolver. As well, living up to his teachings to Jack, Solidus carries with him a set of high-frequency blades styled as a daisho, or set of katana and wakizashi, with Solidus's left sword being slightly smaller than his right. The weapons are also specially named, with one of them being called Democrat and the other one being Republican, which just has me wondering, if he controlled both parties as weapons, does that mean that Solidus might be our first third-party president? That's a topic for another video. The two-sword method also is seemingly taken from the legends of Miyamoto Musashi, a figure in Japanese history who was widely renowned as one of the best swordsmen of all time. Being almost a natural-born fighter, he claimed his first victory at the young age of 13, which of course can be related to Solidus and his own young age being correlated with his role as a soldier. As well, with Solidus's desire to see the S3 program play out throughout the story of Metal Gear Solid 2, it is similar in concept to when Musashi would travel Japan for stronger and stronger opponents to test himself against, though Solidus's final duel may not turn out the same as Musashi's. Now, after claiming the big shell, Solidus made a demand of $30 billion or else he would detonate the shell, causing one of the largest ecological disasters of modern time. Though, this demand was more so a smokescreen used to buy time as they would unlock the Black Briefcase, also known as the Nuclear Football, as well as allow his Sons of Liberty to search throughout the big shell for its true purpose, this being Arsenal gear. As with the briefcase unlocked, they would be able to control the massive submersible mobile fortress and gain access to a plethora of Metal Gear rays on board it. But more importantly, they would be able to access the AI core known as GW, which will be used to enact the Patriots' global online censorship of all information. As well, Arsenal gear is armed with a payload of a purified hydrogen bomb. And while the reality of the situation is that Dead Cell was planning to steal Arsenal and detonate the nuclear weapon over top New York City's Manhattan Island, completely taking it offline and out of the Patriots' control, which in turn would allow them to create a new outer heaven right in the middle of the world's melting pot, Solidus had no real intentions to go alongside this goal, though he had no problem with them doing it either. Instead, he simply wanted one thing: a list stored within GW's database, which contained the name and location of all 12 of his puppet masters. Though what Solidus hadn't realized is that the Patriots had been truly playing him the entire time. Firstly, with the S3 program, which Ocelot informed Solidus about during their operation, claiming it to simply be the Solid Snake simulation program designed to train anyone to become the next Solid Snake, which is a concept that Solidus found rather interesting, letting it play out for the most part because he wanted to see the results. This, in part, is why everything that played out on the Big Shell is very similar to that of Metal Gear Solid 1, from Dead Cell mirroring Foxhound to Solidus acting as his own Liquid and Big Boss counterparts. There's even a cyborg ninja, but this even included the computer virus made by Emma Emmerich and inserted into GW, as it was designed to resemble Foxdie, which means that, much like how Foxdie hunted down specific genes, Emma's worm cluster targeted specific information within GW and eradicated it. This included Solidus's coveted list on the Patriots. Ocelot also mentions that Raiden and Solidus were specifically selected by the Patriots for this program due to them having a similar relationship to Solid Snake and Big Boss, as well as the fact that he was working for the Patriots all along. Which means that all this time, while Solidus believed that he was able to escape their gaze, everything he had done up to this point was actually a carefully curated plot made by the Patriots. And this is because the real S3 program is not a Solid Snake simulation, but a selection for societal sanity, as the whole Big Shell incident was merely a test site for whether or not the Patriots could manipulate a story and its events while it was occurring, doing so by carefully manipulating every element of the story to fit a specific narrative, which means that no matter how much Solidus fought back, he eventually ended up aiding the Patriots in their actions. And eventually, Arsenal Gear would end up being sent on a crash course towards Manhattan Island, tearing through the city and stopping at Capitol Hill. And famously, this entire crash sequence was cut from the game nearly last minute, due of course to the September 11th attacks, which occurred just 2 months before the release of the game worldwide. Though, after this crash, Solidus and Raiden are thrown from Arsenal Gear onto the roof of the Capitol, and it's here where Solidus truly reveals his motivation, as due to the nature of his birth, Solidus was never offered the luxury to engage with the natural ability to enjoy his life. As he puts it,
Everything that's about to be wiped out by their digital censorship. Jack, listen to me. We're all born with an expiration date. No one lasts forever. Life is nothing but a grace period for turning the best of our genetic material into the next generation. The data of life is transferred from parent to child. That's how it works. But we have no heirs, no legacy. Cloned from our father, with the ability to reproduce conveniently engineered out. What is our legacy if we cannot pass the torch? Proof of our existence, a mark of some sort. When the torch is passed on from parent to child, it extends beyond DNA. Information is imparted as well. All I want is to be remembered by other people, by history. The Patriots are trying to protect their power, their own interests, by controlling the digital flow of information. I want my memory, my existence to remain.
Essentially, Solidus viewed the Patriots' control over the media and internet alike as a direct threat against life itself, as if man is more than their genes, then we must exist beyond our lives in the form of our actions, which works with one of the key elements of Metal Gear Solid 2's story, that being the concept of the meme, based on Richard Dawkins' work, The Selfish Gene, which is an inherited behavior or idea which can be formed from many different places such as tradition or culture. The human meme is one's chance to have their legacy carried on to the next generation, and this is why Solidus did what he did to Jack. He wanted to test his theory on passing on one's memes. If he, without knowing or being related to the boy prior, could instill in him an identity, meant to Solidus that he could leave his mark on the future. And it is what makes Raiden's brainwashing all that more painful to Solidus, as it is the Patriots showing him how easy it is to erase someone. Though, even with GW filled with that worm cluster, Solidus could still get the information he was looking for from the nanomachines inside of Raiden, and thus he challenges him to one final clash of wills, tossing Raiden a high-frequency blade while drawing his own set, though this fight would be the final battle of Solidus' career. With Raiden severing his spinal cord with a well-timed counter hit, Solidus would stumble over to the ledge of Capitol Hill before finally collapsing, his hand extending up towards seemingly nothing, in a similar fashion to the way he lies at the foot of the statue of George Washington, a man that he not only idolized, but wished to reclaim the country that he had fought so hard to liberate. Though similar to the Arsenal gear changes, this scene was also changed as well, with the thing that Solidus was grasping at being an American flag that was flowing during the whole cutscene, and this flag would then eventually be cut down by Raiden so it could gently float down over top Solidus, a somewhat somber goodbye to his father figure. With the scene itself being cut likely due to the action of cutting down a flag being considered tasteless during America's recovering times. Though the greater tragedy and almost irony of this situation is that even if Raiden was to be killed here, the names that Solidus would have recovered from his dead son's nanomachines would have simply been the long-dead names of the philosophers. The Patriots had set up a dead end paved in the blood of his own son, undoing all of Solidus' hard work and leaving him with nothing. He was a puppet no matter how many times he tried to sever his strings.
Your plan was invalidated even before execution, Solidus.
Which is true so much so that even in death, they couldn't stop fucking with Solidus. As his brain-dead body was recovered by the Patriots, and due to the nature of Solidus being a perfect copy of Big Boss, his body parts were harvested so that they could repair the damaged body of Big Boss, following the events of Metal Gear 2. As well, Solidus' corpse would eventually be placed into the care of Big Mama, before eventually facing an actual death at the hands of Liquid Ocelot, who, after taking control over SOP's system, would kill him with a sort of god gun, this being the Thor single-shot pistol, which, while being a low-production model, is an extraordinarily powerful hand cannon, and ironically, this is the most iconic usage of this weapon in all of media. Also, interestingly enough, if you pay attention to the body of Big Boss during Metal Gear Solid 4, you can tell that it's Solidus pretty quickly by the fact that the wrong eye is missing. As well, the face camo that you unlock if you get a perfect run of Metal Gear Solid 4's Big Boss Extreme difficulty is actually the skeletal face of Solidus, even though it's labeled as Big Boss. Even in meta, Solidus is forgotten, which almost kind of plays into the tragic nature of Solidus being forgotten to time, as even in the novelization of Metal Gear Solid 4, his body is recovered and buried under the belief that he is his father, completely erasing the man's legacy. Which leads me to saying that Solidus is one of the most phenomenally written tragic figures in Metal Gear. He is a man who so desperately wanted to be remembered and believed so firmly in the importance of personal freedoms that he would stake his life for the option of a future where someone like him wouldn't have to worry about theirs. He is also someone who plays so well with the themes of his given game, this being memes. Because ultimately, in the end, Solidus just wanted to live up to his namesake in genes, this identity forged out of giants of a bygone age, the ones which Solidus had to fill the role of. He is, in a way, the ultimate meme given life, and his feelings, training, and purpose eventually were inherited by his son, Jack. And it is through the memes of Solidus that his dreams can finally be fulfilled, as his son and his clone brother Solid were able to use the Fox Alive program to completely dismantle the Patriots. Well, and there's also the Sears program. I mean, leave it to Sundowner to have the biggest memory of all characters in Metal Gear. But I guess Solidus was the president during his favorite period of time.
Like the good old days after 9/11.
And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. Every little bit helps keep this channel flowing as smoothly as it does. And if you want to ensure your future, well, you can do so by buying a copy of Shimonetta, A Boring World Where the Content of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at, by Shimonetta.com.